My wife wanted to buy one of these travel strollers by Yo-Yo. It's like the super collapsible one that fits up in the overhead, and they're like crazy expensive.
Mhm.
And once I found out that Saks sold them, I was like all in on it. I was like, yes, we can go. We can. So I called the Saks in New York, their flagship store, and I was like, do you have any Yo-Yo strollers? And they're like, yeah, we have one in stock. And I was like, come on. And we take our daughter. I have a funny picture of it. We jump on the subway. I was like, we got to get there before it sells.
Welcome to the Military Money Manual podcast, where every episode is all about achieving financial independence in the military faster than before. We believe personal finance shouldn't be boring or intimidating. Building wealth can be simple, and financial freedom is the ultimate financial goal. Now, here's your hosts, Spencer and Jamie.
Hey, podcast listeners, Spencer Reese here from MilitaryMoneyManual.com. Today's episode is a great discussion with Rob Shaye from Fireside Finances. I first met Rob at FinCon 2019 in Washington, D.C. He's a Coast Guard reservist who also created and taught a personal finance class at the Coast Guard Academy. He has his own business focused on financial education where he leads personal finance and investing workshops for employees of large companies. And he's also an experienced military travel hacker who's pulled off some great travel hacks as a reservist. And as always today, I've also got my co-host here. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, Spencer. Thanks for listening this week, guys. As always, if you have any questions or feedback, you can send that to us on Instagram at Military Money Manual or email us at info@militarymoneymanual.com. Just a quick reminder that this episode is for informational purposes only. We are not investment advisors, and this episode does not constitute investment advice.
And without further ado, here's our conversation with Rob Shaye. Hey, Rob, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, Rob, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a certified financial planner and your story through becoming a Coast Guard reservist?
Yeah, sure thing, Jamie. Happy to talk about that. I went to the Coast Guard Academy and I served 10 years on active duty. I was 4 years at sea and then did some shoreside work and went to grad school with the Coast Guard. And then after that, I always was interested in a job in the civilian sector. So I went to the inactive ready reserve, the IRR, for a couple years and just kind of went into, for those of you who are familiar with the IRR, it's kind of like a pending status where you don't really have many obligations to the military. So I went the IRR for a couple years. And then I moved over to the selective reserves. That's kind of the reserves that we think about when we talk about reservists. That's the weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. So I went over to CellRes and was drilling for a couple of years. In the civilian world, I've always been a personal finance nut and nerd. So I knew I wanted to do something in finance. And my mother was a teacher for over 40 years. So I kind of have that in my blood too. So I combined two of my favorite things, which is teaching and personal finance. And pursued my CFP credential and then started my own business doing that. So running financial wellness classes for companies. And then on the side, I'm a Coast Guard reservist as well. So that's kind of my winding path to how I got to where I am today.
Rob, what's the process to become a CFP? I know there's like an education requirement, a test requirement, anything else in there to actually get the designation?
Yeah, it is a pretty robust process. It took me a couple years to get. The two big credentials in the financial world would be CFA and then CFP. CFA is more theory-based and takes a little bit longer. CFP is more application-based, kind of like it's the applied side of financial planning. So CFP, I studied. There's an education component. Most people do it in about a year, and you can take a prep class. I did it a little bit less. I condensed it and just did it in a little bit shorter time, but about 8 months of pretty much 4 or 5 nights a week studying and taking practice exams. And it was pretty robust, but it was actually surprisingly interesting for me. And I know I'm in the minority part of the population there that I like to spend a Thursday night reading about financial ins and outs and bond ladders and all these, all these weird topics. So it wasn't that bad for me. Although parts of it, were a little redundant, learning about all the different retirement plans and all the obscure ones that you would never actually use in practice. So kind of did the education requirement. Then you have to have 2 years of experience or 3 years of experience. And my time working at BlackRock and a fintech startup counted for that. Then you take a pretty rigorous test. It's like an all-day test. And luckily I passed that on the first try. And then you pass an ethics requirement too. And then you have every other year ongoing continuing education credits as well. So it's definitely a robust process, but super interesting. And I tell people, I've coached a lot of people who are interested in the CFP designation. And it's pretty like you can make a free account at cfp.net, and you can even take the first module. You could, pay Kaplan or Dalton or one of the big companies out there and take the first module. There's like 7 modules, and you could see if it's something you're interested in. So there's a way to toe into it and step into it if you are interested and you think you're interested in pursuing it.
That's pretty neat. We've talked a lot on the previous episodes about the impact of fees on your overall accumulation of wealth. And so where, maybe for the listener who's active duty military or maybe the spouse of a military member, where would it make sense to reach out to a CFP or a CFA? Where in someone's wealth building journey or journey towards financial independence would that be something they should consider and see if it's right for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, I don't have like a one-on-one advising or assets under management business. That's just not my business model. Most CFPs or CFAs do have that business model. I do think it can be really helpful at some point. People often face decisions, military members and civilians alike, face times in their life where they're just making a big financial purchase, or they're making a big move, or maybe they've inherited some money, maybe buying a house, which is arguably the largest, financial decision, probably other than getting married. Your largest financial decision of your life, right? So those types of instances, it can be tremendously helpful to pay hourly and get 2, 3, 4 hours or however long it takes for a CFP or CFA to help you out. And I'm a big fan of that, right? I tell people that be very comfortable paying for financial planning, and you probably don't need to pay for asset management. So I kind of separate those two things in my mind. Asset management being like portfolio construction, managing your investments, that can be done either by a robot or by you very easily and very cheaply. And then financial planning is kind of like the knowing all the rules and what accounts to draw from. That is starting to get automated, but it's not really quite there yet. And that's, in my book, that's okay to pay hourly for. So that's kind of when I would say it makes sense for a military member, maybe facing retirement. Those are huge financial decisions. If you elect the SBP, the survivor benefit plan, how much life insurance do you have? All that kind of stuff can be very well supported by a financial planner who has military experience, right? So if you're going to look for one, try to find one that has experience with what you're looking for, because they all specialize. Like, I know the basics of Social Security, but I'm by no means an expert in Social Security. So if someone, if a person in their 60s came to me and said, "Hey, Rob, can you help me work through this Social Security claiming strategy?" I would say, I'm not your guy, right? Like, you should go find someone who's an expert in Social Security to navigate that problem. But conversely, if someone came to me and they're like, "Hey, help me talk through my TSP funding options, and should I fund that first over my Roth IRA?" then I would absolutely help them out, and talk through that decision.
I think that's a great distinction between paying for a few hours of a professional's time to build a good strategy to go forward and execute. That could be, depending on how much the CFP charges, right? That could be like $500 to $1,000. But what an amazing return on investment you'll get from just that small investment of both time and money to have a professional look at where you're at and where you want to go, and to kind of provide the direction to get there. And then you can just, if they're a good CFP, or if there's someone who believes in low cost index fund investing, then you can put your money to work into an index fund that's going to charge you, 5 basis points and be extremely cheap. And so I really like how you brought up that distinction between the paying a lot for your investments or investing the money into getting some good professional advice.
Yeah, it's like I tell people, if you're taking the fitness approach, right? Maybe you don't need to pay for a personal trainer to work out with you like 3 days a week. That's kind of excessive. But would it make sense to pay a personal trainer or a nutritionist for a couple hours of their time to design a fitness plan or a nutrition plan for you? And then you run with that plan and maybe check in with that person once a year, or, if you got sick, you can check in with them more often, something like that. So I kind of help that analogy. I think that helps people kind of relate it to something that they're more comfortable with.
Yeah, that's cool. Rob, you mentioned in the talking about CFP, term life insurance and VA benefits, survivor benefit plan, things like that. Are there other things that maybe the average service member might not know as a CFP can help them with? Other than just here's a hot stock tip of the day, is a lot of times what people think of when they think of investment advice or getting help with their finances.
Yeah. Yeah, really. And it's funny because like a lot of people, you're right, Jamie, a lot of people like just think of that as the, um, like the investment side of it as being the bread and butter or the only component of it, but there's so much more. And that was where the CFP education background was just really fascinating to me, like taking at it, an insurance needs analysis and looking at people's umbrella insurance needs and their liability and all those kind of things. And then looking at retirement plans and small business owners, and really taking a comprehensive look at someone's benefits package and seeing where they can improve their finances. Saving for college, right? That's a tremendous one. And a CFP, if we translate it to the military world, like if I'm helping, I don't do one-on-one asset management. I do help my friends with some of this stuff, but when I'm talking to someone in the military, we go into all sorts of, like I was talking to my buddy the other night and helping him out at Coast Guard 05. And I was talking to him and, just making sure that his post 9/11 GI Bill was set up in a way and his benefits were transferred to his kids. And, did he have all that squared away before he, separates in a few years? All those things are just so important. Like there are little things, right? Like a little nugget is you're eligible for VGLI, right? The Veterans Group Life Insurance. When you leave the military, the premiums are about twice as expensive as SGLI. But you're only allowed to have how much coverage you had of SGLI when you left the service. So if Spencer has $400,000 and Jamie, you have $100,000 when you separate, then when you go to turn on VGLI later down the road, those are your caps that you can enroll in. So why not the 3 months before you separate from the service, why not up your coverage to 400,000? That way, if you want to, take on the max VGLI later in life, you have that option for you. So little things like that maybe the average person isn't really thinking of, that a professional might be able to help you navigate.
Yeah, because you've seen, not just one life experience, but several, or maybe even dozens or hundreds of other service members who have gone through the exact same situation. And so you can apply the experience and knowledge of other people to someone's specific situation. One thing I forgot to mention in your bio was that you say that you opened your first IRA at 15 with your lawn mowing money. I'm curious, what did you invest your money in when you were 15, and has your investing strategy changed much since then?
Yeah, I still remember it. My first IRA, and actually it wasn't a Roth IRA back then because we didn't have them. It was 1996. We had traditional IRAs, and I used my lawn. My mom now teases me that she actually, I don't remember this part, but she fronted me the contribution. So she let me keep the money, and then she matched my contribution or fronted me the money, which was very generous of her. But she watched a local news segment that talked about opening an IRA for your kids. And I remember the fund. It was a Franklin Dynatech investment fund. It was Class A, it had the full load, saddled with fees. It was 1.4% expense ratio. I think the fund has since closed, which is no surprise. But I thought it was the greatest thing ever, right? I had $300 in there or whatever it was. And I was so happy watching it. I got a statement in the mail with my name on it from an investment company. I thought that was just the coolest thing. And like any 15-year-old, right? But a nerdy 15-year-old Rob thought that was really the best thing ever. Then I got smart on fees. And when the Roth IRAs came online, I switched over to Roth. And then I was just well aware of keeping your fees low. So investment strategy has vastly changed since then. Now I'm a low fee index fund, broadly diversified kind of investment strategy. But back then it was just taking the lead from the investment advisor who helped open that account.
I think one great point that comes out of that story is when you start investing when you're young. For most people listening to this podcast, you're probably not 15. You're probably in your 20s or 30s. But if you start investing now, and if it's just with a couple $100 or $1,000, you can make a lot of mistakes with those small amounts and learn a lot of like very valuable lessons that when it comes to investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future, you can avoid those mistakes and then because you've already had the experience, you've already learned it when you were younger. So I think that's a great lesson. If you're a young E3, 19, 20, 21 years old listening to this, and you've just opened up your Robinhood account and you've got some money in there into VTI ETF or whatever, and you're also trading some options on the side. Like, okay, like have your fun trading the options, but when you lose all your money doing that, learn that lesson so that when you have a substantial sum of money in 10 or 20 years, that you're not gambling it on Robinhood and trying to make your next million off of options.
Yeah, I have a little story about that. So I was still in high school, and I don't know if you remember do you remember Palm Pilots? They were like the precursor to the iPhone, right? They were made by Palm. Before that, they were made by a company called 3Com. And then Palm spun off of 3Com. But the investment advisor we had at the time, it was from American Express. He thought this was like the next, and it was hot, right? It was like when tech was still pre-2000. It was still like, up on the upswing. So he thought Palm Pilot was like the best thing. And I know this is crazy looking back on it and now having my financial background, but he had like half of like our family's wealth in Palm Pilot. And it was crazy. And he had us buying Palm Pilot, like every 2 weeks we were buying some, and, it just kept going up and we thought it was the greatest thing. And I remember when it spun off the day Palm Pilot IPO'd, my mom let me stay home from school and I was like glued to the TV watching the stock price. I think I was a junior or maybe a senior. But I just watched our account balance and I was like, this is awesome. And then like reality set in and Palm just tanked. Like it went to the toilet and fell out of graces. And it was a sizable like amount of money back then. And, can't even think about what the opportunity cost has been since then. But that lesson I learned in having a concentrated position is one that will forever stick with me. And I can tell that story and listeners can be like, oh yeah, concentrated positions are risky. But now when I see someone with like 40% of their money in Google or Amazon or whatever, as safe as it seems, right? And everyone thinks those companies couldn't fall from the graces. We've seen the big giants like AOL just like disintegrate. And, Palm Pilot at the time was like the hot darling of the tech world. And that's a lesson that I will just never forget. And, those things, you have to be burned to really understand the risk there.
So, Rob, you share another passion with both Spencer and me, and that's travel hacking. How did you find out about travel hacking, and what was kind of your first exposure to it?
Yeah, I'm a huge, I love what you guys are doing about getting the word out on travel hacking, especially for the military community, because it's been in my, my DNA for a while. I was trying to think back about it before I came on the show here, what my first experience was. And I think it was a American Express Delta card, which I still have to this day. I opened it up in 2000 when I got to the Coast Guard Academy. And I think it was like a 20,000 or maybe 25,000 Sky Miles bonus. And I remember getting that card and using those miles to fly to Mardi Gras with some of my classmates from the Coast Guard Academy. And I was like, when I was 18 years old, and I was like, this is the best thing. I can fly all the way to New Orleans for free for a long weekend. And, we had a blast at Mardi Gras, like, a couple young 18-year-olds would. And I just remember thinking like, that was awesome. I got to go on that trip for free. Didn't have to pay for my plane ticket, use these Sky Miles. And then from there, it was just off to the races. So I've been doing this for about 20 years and, been through different fits and spurts of, I'll go aggressive on, a little while for cards but it's always been a passion of mine. So I think that initial Delta card was one that kind of kicked off the interest.
And when you were opening up your cards, you were at the Coast Guard Academy. So was that when Amex was applying SCRA benefits, Service Member Civil Relief Act benefits?
I don't think they were. I was trying to remember that. I believe I didn't really go heavy on the Amex SCRA benefits until 2015 with the Platinum cards. So in between there, I had a lot of cards, but I don't particularly remember getting a lot of the annual fees waived. Maybe I just wasn't attracted to the high annual fee cards, but I was getting a lot of cards. And I remember back in the day in like 2008 to 2006 to 2008, there was a website way back when called Fat Wallet Finance. And they had this thing called Apparama, and it was like AOR. And that was the term for applying for multiple cards in one day. And you could apply for like 6, 7, or 8 cards in one day. And people called that an Apparama. And now you don't have to do that. You can spread out your apps. But back then you could do it, and you could condense your hard pulls kind of all into one day. So I remember doing Apparamas like every 6 months or a year. And then, that kind of stuff. But I think Amex, to get back to your question, Spencer, I think Amex wasn't doing the fee waivers back then, or if they were, I just wasn't playing that game as heavily as I am now.
So now, do you prefer cash back, or do you prefer the travel rewards cards? What's your kind of go-to rewards planning?
That's tough. I love them both. I use them both. I just finished the minimum spend on my Amex Business Gold, and I got 90,000 membership rewards points, which I redeemed for cash back. I know there are a lot of people out there that would get more value there and try to transfer that to partners. I'm not a huge, I've taken some business class flights, but I don't fly a ton of business and first. So I cashed those 90,000 points out via my Schwab Investor Rewards account and got $990 cash back. So that was, I love that cash back, but then I just got approved today for the Marriott Boundless 250,000 point card. So that one I'll use for, my wife's pretty good about finding Marriott rewards in the sweet spots in the redemption chart. So we'll try to take 5 nights and find a nice Marriott to go to for a vacation. So I don't know. I love them both, Jamie. I try to spread the love among both those cards. I don't discriminate.
Do you have a preferred flexible point scheme, whether it's Amex membership rewards, Chase Ultimate Rewards, Capital One miles, Citi thank you points? Do you have a favorite one that you like to earn points with?
Yeah, I love the Ultimate Rewards. I find those to be the most flexible for me. I love the pay yourself back feature. I just think that's just really handy when you want to just zero out, some, like now it's dining. So you can just go out to eat and then redeem your points against your dining purchases and get that 50% bonus. I really like that. And I also have used it to transfer to, if I'm just like 2,000 miles short of a United redemption, I can just send over, a low amount of United miles from my Chase Ultimate Rewards. Same thing with Hyatt. I've done that to keep Hyatt points active from expiring. I'll send over 1,000 Hyatt points, every 18 months or something. If I have, I have some Hyatt points sitting in my World of Hyatt account that I just haven't been able to redeem, but I don't want them to expire. So I just send over some Ultimate Rewards points every now and then. But I find those to be the most flexible. Membership rewards points, I generally cash out for cash back. It's just harder for me to find those partner redemptions than, so there's something to be said for simplicity. And I like just cashing out for cash back at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I find that I tend to build up a lot of Amex membership reward points just because the best redemptions are on those long haul international business class or first class flights, like on Emirates, Etihad, Singapore. And to find availability and to actually have enough time to go take those trips. So next year I'm planning this big trip where I'm taking me, my wife, and her parents. We're going to go from New Zealand to Europe for 6 weeks. And I'm going to try to do both directions, business class, either Singapore or Emirates. And it's tough, to find the availability and to find the right airport you want to go in, to find the ticket that doesn't have a terrible, 17-hour connection or whatever, where you're going to have to go get a hotel room anyways. So it's, I agree that the Chase Ultimate Reward points, especially since you can redeem them for 1.5 cents when you have the Chase Sapphire Reserve in the portal. I mean, that's just it's an easy redemption, and it's much better than redeeming them for Amazon purchases, right? Where you're only going to get 0.7 cents. Jamie and I have a good friend who cashed out several thousand, I think it was Amex points for gift cards the other day. And, it breaks our heart. So
Was it a military person?
it was, yes.
Yeah.
He needs to come to see the light, but,
Yeah,
we're
one of the sweet spots I found is you get the, just get the Schwab Platinum card. You get the that never really goes above 60,000 membership rewards points, but you can get a Schwab checking account bonus for signing up, and then that unlocks the Schwab Platinum card, get the 60,000 membership rewards points. But then more importantly, it gives you an avenue to cash out membership rewards points. They lowered it to 1.1 cents per point, but used to be 1.25, which was awesome. But
yeah, that was a great cash out redemption.
Yeah, and I used to do that into my Schwab account. That's really the only thing I use my Schwab account for. I do my investing elsewhere, but I keep my Schwab account open. The money shows up instantly, and then I send it right out of Schwab. So I like that avenue, and I just kudos to you, Spencer, for navigating that award chart and looking for the availability, because that's just something I haven't tackled yet.
Yeah, it's definitely time consuming, but it can be extremely rewarding, because some of the tickets I'm looking at are $10,000 tickets, and I'm going to be able to pick them up for probably right around 100 to 150,000 points. So, getting almost 10x or 10 cents per point of value, which can be, which is huge. So recently, so you talked about you just opened up a Chase Marriott Bonvoy card, and you upgraded one of your older Chase Marriott cards to the Ritz-Carlton card. And I haven't been able to find out a lot about this. I think Chase discontinued new applications to this card, but you can still upgrade your cards to it. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I just kind of completed that over the last 7 days. I had a Marriott Premier card that had the $95 annual fee. It was being waived for military, but it was that level of card. It gave me, I think, a 35,000 annual night certificate. I had it for, I think, like 12 years or so. I found out you could upgrade that to the Ritz-Carlton. So I did that. And one thing that maybe listeners don't know this, but if you product change within the family at Chase, your SCRA or MLA benefits carry with you. So that was one thing that's kind of like a nice little tip or hack. So if you're getting SCRA or MLA benefits on like the United Explorer card, the one that usually has a $95 annual fee, you can upgrade or product change to the club card that has I think it's a $550 annual fee or a high annual fee. And those SCRA benefits.
The United Club Infinite.
Yeah, and that'll carry with you. So you don't have to worry. For a while, I thought like, oh my gosh, my fee waivers are going to go away. It wasn't the case. So what I did was I upgraded the Marriott Premier card to a Ritz-Carlton, and then that allowed me to apply for the Marriott Boundless, because you can't apply for the Marriott Boundless if you have a Marriott Premier. But I gave it a couple days in the Chase system to kind of clear out. I ended up learning some really intricate details of the Chase system during that process. But my advice would be give it like 7 days after you product change, because I gave it 24 hours and that was not nearly enough. But give it a healthy amount of days before you apply. I was trying to squeeze it in before the Boundless promotion ends. And luckily I got approved. So, I got approved for the Boundless card. I just got that. I called reconsideration again today and got approved for it. So that'll give me the 250,000 points. And then I can keep that Ritz-Carlton card. And that one has the annual free night. Spencer, I know you and I were talking about this, of 50,000 points per night. So the MLA benefits or SCRA benefits will apply to that. I'll get another annual free night. And it has a $300 incidental travel credit. So if you're eligible or you have a route to get to that Ritz-Carlton card, it sounds like it's a good keeper. My only regret is I didn't product change to that, 8 or 9 years ago, because I wish I had.
So Rob, you have another card that I don't think Spencer has either, the Paceline card. What's been your experience with that so far? And would you recommend it as a good card?
Yeah, I actually really like this one. I have a lot of cards, and it's rare to find a card that I really have like an emotional attachment to. This one I've only had for like 3 weeks, and I'm like falling for it. It's I really like it a lot. what
It's like a
attracted
love
one of my
story.
favorite resources out there is doctorofcredit.com.
Yeah.
And, my brother and I teased that. We're like, what did you see on DOC today? Or what's hot on Doctor of Credit? And so we're always checking that. And that's where I learned about Paceline Card. And it gives you, what attracted to me about it was it gives you 5% back on groceries, which is pretty good. Our family of 4 spends a fair amount on groceries in the Bay Area. And then 3% back everywhere else. And like 3% back, I mean, that beats any other card out there. Beats Citi Double Cash. It beats the combo between Freedom Unlimited and CSR and all those. USAA launched a 3% back card a few years ago, but they folded it. I think they grandfathered in the people that were in there, but basically no one has been able to sustain a 3% back card. So it's interesting that Paceline is offering this to people. And then but the key is here, this is a card about being fit and keeping your fitness at a reasonable level. So you get those bonus reward categories if you log 150 minutes of activity of elevated heart rate per week. And it doesn't have to be like, CrossFit, high intensity training. I walk my daughter to daycare in the morning and pick her up in the afternoon, and that knocks out most of my minutes, for the day. So it's just, if you're walking, you can be outside. I've found myself going for more runs now in the morning because I got to log my minutes and get my rewards. And then the other cool thing is they give you a free Apple Watch. So like, I'm not a huge Apple Watch guy, but I picked up a free Apple Watch with it. So it's kind of fun. They've combined all the kind of incentives. So they give you, I don't know, have you guys read about it at all, or have you know much about it?
So I actually just a week or two ago downloaded the app. I don't have the card, but it's been giving me like small Amazon gift cards for doing my workouts each week.
Yeah.
Here's a sample of whatever for $3. Only pay shipping or whatever. Is it a Chase card that's eligible for MLA waivers? Is that the bank that?
It's not a Chase card. It's actually it's kind of bizarre. It's like a card that's issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, EVOLVE, bank I've never heard of. They seem to do a lot of co-branded cards. And then also Rails Bank, RAILZ. So two players I've never heard of before. And then Paceline is like the San Francisco tech startup that is, so it's like those 3 players are involved in the card. There is a $60 annual fee, but I don't know. I called and asked if military benefits or MLA waivers would apply to that. And they told me, send in your military documentation and we'll review it. So I'm waiting for my next set of reserve orders. And then I was going to send those in and see. You always do better. Like I could send in my blanket orders for the year, but it's always better when I send in ADT orders. And that has a stronger chance of triggering an MLA benefit.
That's a great segue there, Rob, to talking about military fee waivers as a reservist. So on active duty, and we've talked about this on so many episodes, hopefully people are sick of hearing about it, but when you're an active duty military or an active duty military spouse, married, a civilian spouse married to an active duty service member, you can go check your MLA status in the MLA database, and you just Google MLA database DOD, and it should pop right up. And as long as you're in the MLA database correctly, and for most military service members, it should be automatic. And for spouses, if you're properly in DEERS, it should also be pretty automatic. It's pretty easy when you're on active duty, but I imagine as a reservist, there's a few more hoops to jump through. So can you kind of walk us through your strategy and how you approach getting your MLA and SCRA benefits on your credit cards as a reservist?
Sure. Like you said, it's much easier for active duty folks. But as a reservist or a mil spouse, it can be a little bit different. So it's also a little bit, since I am a reservist and a mil spouse, it's a little bit hard for me to tease out what benefits I'm receiving as a reservist vice what benefits they're extending to me versus a mil spouse. But I think I have an idea of how to figure that out. So I take the approach of like, send in your orders. Chase makes it super easy. You can upload it to their website into the secure message center. You can request an SCRA or MLA review if it doesn't happen automatically for you, right? Like now they're checking, I think post 2017, they're checking every application against the MLA database or the DoD database. but you can also send in your orders. So as a reservist, if you have orders, especially if you're activated or you go on ADOS or Title 10 orders greater than 30 days. So if those orders are greater than 30 days, send them in. So like email them into Amex, upload them to Chase, send them to your banks. You either call them and ask them what the email address is. I think Citi still takes them via email. Chase, you can upload them. I think Amex, you have to email them. And I can't remember the specifics of each issuer, but get your orders to the bank and then they will review your accounts. So do that when you have your orders and ideally when you're still on, reserve deployment. So, reserve deployments can be anywhere from like, I've done one for 42 days. I took those orders and I sent them into all the issuers and then those benefits extend. They don't just end at the 42 days. Like Chase applies your benefits for, I think it's like for 24 months or 36 months. So I've had those benefits extended even beyond the length of my my active duty time as a reservist, which is pretty generous and pretty sweet. So I take the approach of just like send them in. You could also send in your ADT orders. They're not Chase. Chase has this whole department that works for this, and they're usually pretty good about sorting out what's ADT versus like long term what we call ADOS or Title 10. But sometimes you get a rep that doesn't really know the difference and they just see military orders and they apply it across the board. So it's worth a try. The worst they can do is come back and say you didn't qualify for the fee waiver. And then you could also send in, like I could send in my wife's orders. I haven't tried that yet because Chase has waived everything just based on my orders. But I could just upload my wife's orders and see if that qualifies me as a spouse.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's one of the most frequent questions I get is, hey, I'm in the reserves, or hey, I'm in the guard. And, what if they don't apply MLA? Like, what if they don't waive my annual fees? And I'm like, well, then you just pay the annual fee and you're just like people still make travel hacking work, even paying the annual fees. So any military benefits you get on top of it, yeah, they make it a lot easier. Go into it assuming that maybe 1 year you'll have to pay the annual fees. And then if you can still make the math work, right? Like, especially like right now on the Amex Platinum card, the public bonus is 100,000 points. I mean, you could just open up another Schwab card, get another 60,000 points, and then cash out 160,000 Amex points at 1.1 cents, which would be like $1,760. And right there, you've just covered, several years of the annual fee. And then every year that you go to renew, hopefully you have active duty orders that you can submit and then get a fee waiver. And I know for Amex, they're pretty generous, where basically if you've ever qualified for SCRA or MLA, they keep extending it for years and years. At least that's most of the data points that I've received from that. One thing you mentioned, Rob, in our show notes here was that you got your mortgage rate reduced when applying for MLA. Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah, and that was a total unexpected benefit. So one of these times I had sent in my reserve orders to Chase. I had my mortgage with Chase at the time, and it wasn't. They review all your accounts that you have with them. Checking accounts, qualify for fee waivers anyway, and there aren't that many fees there, but they review all your accounts. So I got a letter back saying that we've applied SCRA benefits to your credit card accounts, which I was happy to see. And then it was weird. I got this like cryptic FedEx delivery. First, the first sign of it was I started getting my monthly mortgage amount, my payment that it was auto deducting from my checking account was less. And I was like, what's with that? I mean, why am I paying less on my mortgage? I noticed it right away. And I was like, well, okay, let's figure out what's happening. And then I saw something on like the line that said like SCRA. And I was like, well, that's weird. Chase is reducing my mortgage based on SCRA benefits. And then I got this like cryptic delivery from FedEx. I was in Seattle at the time. And it was like, you have a package, but you have to come down to the FedEx center and sign for it. And I was like, what the heck? What's in this package? And who's it from? So like I eagerly go down to the FedEx place in like South Seattle and pick up this like a FedEx envelope. And I look at the return address. It says like Chase SCRA. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's this? And I open it up and it's like a check. And I think it was for like $1,600 or something.
Wow.
And
wow.
It was sizable. I mean, it wasn't like just, $20 or something. And they had a letter explaining that I sent in my orders and they reviewed my mortgage account based on the date of the orders, and they reduced the amount of, they did some huge crazy calculation that I couldn't even begin to understand about how much mortgage interest I had paid during that, whatever, 2 or 3 years that was above the SCRA cap. And they cut me a check for the refund. I've heard of those stories from Amex before, but I never in my wildest dreams thought that Chase would reduce my mortgage, benefit by that. It was like they ended up reducing it. I think it was like 5/8 of a point or something. And then those benefits expired when it timed out after 24 months or something. And then my mortgage rate jumped up to what it was before. So totally unexpected, nice perk. I don't know if I could pull that off again. But I will now. Well, luckily I locked in my rate when it was below the CRA rate, so I don't think it would happen now. But with rates climbing back up, maybe that is a strategy. I don't know if anything above 4% gets like considered for a CRA. Who knows? That'll be a good data point.
Yeah, interesting. So we love good redemptions as well. And your voice just sounds so amazing with that microphone you have. You were telling us before the show about how you redeem some of your benefits for that. So can you talk a little bit about the Amex Business Platinum and one of the benefits you like, and then maybe some recent hotel redemptions or any best redemptions you've had as well?
Sure. Yeah, the joke is that we all have the face for radio, right? That's the. But
whoa. Yeah.
Speak for yourself, Rob. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, so one of the Amex doesn't waive. I know, Spencer, when you were talking about it earlier, Amex is very generous, waiving their personal line of cards for military spouses and for service members. Unfortunately, with their business cards, they no longer waive the annual fee, of course. But those of us who applied back when they did, they still continue to waive those as grandfathered in. So I have 2 business platinums. My wife has 1 business platinum, and those continue to get the $695 annual fee waived, which is awesome. And then, so what I do for redeeming those, they have a myriad of benefits, including the Uber, the annual Uber, monthly Uber credits and such. But one that I really like is actually, and I use this as a small business owner, is the $400 a year at Dell. Each card has $400 a year at Dell. So that's between the 3 cards. That's $1,200 a year that I can spend at Dell. And I buy stuff. I normally don't buy stuff at Dell, but they actually have a pretty good inventory. So I've bought a lot of stuff. Like I bought this new microphone, the Shure SM7B microphone. You can buy I bought a monitor with my, basically it's all free. And the nice thing about the Dell website is it lets you split purchase between up to 3 cards. So you can basically buy $600 worth of stuff in one transaction and split it between the 3 business platinums and get that, it's 2 $200 a year credits. And then the Amex seems to always have a Dell offer. So if it's above $600, you can put the balance on that last card and then apply your 10% Dell offer to that last card and score even more. So
nice.
There's some sweet little, kind of perks in that realm as well. Oh, and then, sorry, I think the second part of the question was hotel redemptions. Is that right?
Yeah. Sorry, I gave you a double whammy there.
Yeah. No. I love talking about this stuff, so it's fun. But the hotel redemptions, I would say the 2 kind of ones that come to mind, we just did a big redemption in Maui at the Wailea Beach Club in Maui, which was awesome, in Wailea. And it's beautiful. We brought our 2 daughters. They're young, and they had like the kids' pool and the water slides and everything. They actually have like a crazy high water slide that the kids can't go on, but I was going down it 10 times a day. It's like the highest water slide in Hawaii or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So that's fun to do, even if you're an adult. I was like pushing the little kids out of the way and going down the water slide. But move it. You got an adult coming through. And so that was fun. And my wife has, because of a TDY deployment she did earlier last year, she has Titanium Elite status. So we used a bunch of Marriott points that we had. I'm trying to think how we earned those Marriott points. I think they were all earned through her stays, and then also a ton of credit card sign-up bonuses. So we had used those to redeem 4 nights, and then with Marriott, you get the 5th night free. So we pulled off, 5 nights at the Wailea Beach Club, And
Wow.
then she got a really nice upgrade to like a ground floor with a lanai, like a really nice upgraded room. And we got the free breakfast credits in the morning. We used our Amex Bonvoy card to pay for the parking fees and the resort fees. So that was a nice redemption, and one that we'll have as a memory for a long time. So that was really nice. It was all done for, I think rooms were $1,000 a night there, so that's like $5,000 of hotel costs that we probably got out the door for like under $200 out of pocket
Wow.
for.
We love Maui. Our time, both Spencer and I just have such fond memories of Hawaii and especially Maui. Great spot. So that fifth night free is incredibly valuable.
I'm just thinking back to the time we went to the Wailea Beach Resort one weekend when when we were stationed in Hawaii, and we had such a good time. I was like, oh, I wonder if there's any availability next weekend. And yep, there was like rooms for 50,000 points. And so we just booked it for the next weekend and came back on the next weekend. Clearly I wasn't working hard enough at my day job, but that was, that was a great, perk of being stationed in the Hawaiian Islands is we could just hop inter island for like $40 on Southwest. And then there was plenty of Marriotts and Hiltons all over the Hawaiian, and Hyatts and IHGs all over the Hawaiian Island chains that you could, cash in your free nights or use points at. And so speaking of Southwest, go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say another kind of funny anecdote or thing that might be helpful is on the way back, we were flying Alaska because we had Alaska status, and we often get upgraded on Alaska. And on the way back, we hadn't been upgraded to first class, and we were a little crying crocodile tears that we hadn't been upgraded to first class. And I know it's a ridiculous tough life, but then we got upgraded. Like I got upgraded and my wife got upgraded, but like my daughter didn't. And we like logged in and it said like you could upgrade her for like, I think it was like $200. And I was like, oh, I can't, like the fare we only paid like $99 for the fare anyway. And I was like, we can't upgrade to pay $200 to like upgrade our daughter to first class. Like that doesn't work. Like we're not going to pay that. And then I remembered that I had set one of my preferred airlines on one of my platinum cards to Alaska, and they've become more strict on what they qualify as an airline incidental. But I was like, seat fees I know count. So we did it. We paid. I looked at my wife. I was like, should we do it? And I was like, wait, I think I can get this for free if I have that card on me. And I had the card on me. So we paid it and upgraded. We all got to fly home in first class. And then it got rebated from Amex as an incidental. I used my entire, annual incidental, but we all got to fly home.
Worth it.
Which was nice. Yeah, it was really nice.
Worth it. That's definitely worth it. So yeah. So speaking of the Amex Platinum Incidental, so that's $200 a year, and it goes. You have to select your airline in January. I think the data points say you can change your airline up to like 3 times if you just send them a message through their customer service chat app, which I found to be like super easy and convenient. Usually I'm just like I'm doing something else and I'm just on the chat app and it just bings at me whenever they need my attention, and I just say, "Yep, approved. Go ahead, do it." And then they're able to change the airline if I want to change the airline like mid-year. But one thing that I don't know if you are familiar with this one, but with Southwest, as long as the fare is below $100, it counts as an incidental and it gets reimbursed. So that was one thing that we were doing in Hawaii when we were flying inter-island, was we would just look for fares that were below $100 and then book them. And then you could even, if you didn't want to fly it, you could cancel it, and they would put the money into your Southwest, whatever they call it, bank
Travel
account.
Credit.
Yeah.
Travel credit. There you go. And because that's one of the nice things about Southwest is they always have the flexible fares.
Yeah, that is a great strategy. I used to have Alaska used to do that same thing, and as a gold member, this was pre-COVID, you could do that, cancel flights and deposit them to your travel bank. But then Amex kind of caught on to that and stopped rebating under $100 fares. So now I've since switched all my platinum cards except one to Southwest for that reason. So I keep one on Alaska, and then the other, I think 6 are on Southwest. And I think Spencer, the one caveat there is you can change your airline as long as you haven't used any of your travel credit. So in my experience, if you like chip away $20 at your credit, then they won't let you change it. But I have had luck changing the airline past January if you haven't used any of those credits. But yeah, and I think there's even a better opportunity. I haven't worried about this yet because we're not towards the end of the calendar year when those credits expire. But if you book a Southwest, previously when you book a fare, so I would just look for any fare on the calendar, use the low fare calendar, find a fare from like Oakland to Denver, have no intent of flying it. It'd be like $98, book it, wait 24 hours, cancel. Instead of refunding it to the card, that's why you got to wait the 24 hours. Otherwise it'll go back to your card and then Amex will claw it back. But you would cancel that ticket, but then retain the dollars in your travel bank for a future flight. But they would be attached to your name, right? So whoever bought the ticket is the only one that can fly. But now with this new fare that Southwest came up with, which is the Wanna Get Away Plus fare, one of the perks of that fare is that the travel credits are interchangeable among flyers.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. I just saw it, I think it came out a month ago. So I'm thinking here, my deal points and miles bells are going off thinking, I think there's I don't want to have to make a prediction of who's going to need the travel credits most. Is it going to be my wife, or my daughter? So now we can basically book those Wanna Get Away Plus fares, cancel them, and then now we can shift those dollars among family members or even outside of the family, really. So I'm curious to try that this year and as a new strategy and see if those become more flexible dollars on Southwest.
Yeah, I always get a little nervous with some of those redemptions and try to think of it as if they ever asked. They're like, yeah, no, I truly intended to take that flight and then plans changed. So it's kind of a fine line there between
That's just because you're a good person, Jamie.
Yeah, I know. But I also don't want to get kicked out of the game either. But one of the ones that the system does also approve, since you're near SFO, have you heard of the United Travel Bank, or have you experimented with that yet? Because Spencer and I have both done that and had good success.
I've heard of Travel Bank. I haven't used it yet, but am I understanding that right? You can just deposit money to the Travel Bank and Amex rebates it?
Yeah, that's right. So if you set United as and again, I hate to talk about this because I think it's going to go away in 3 months. Because
any day now. Yeah.
This is what happened to the American Airlines, where you could buy gift cards on American Airlines and they reimbursed as incidentals. That was back in 2019, 2020, maybe. For United Travel Bank, you just go to Travel Bank and it's kind of weird. You have to buy them in either $50, $100, or $250 increments. So if you have the Amex Aspire card, Amex Hilton Aspire card, you can set United as your airline and then buy a $250 Travel Bank, and then Amex will reimburse it. And then for Amex Platinum, you'd have to buy two $100 gift card
transactions.
You'd have to transactions, right, on the United Travel Bank. And before you do this, I would just caveat, Google Flyer Talk United Travel Bank. And then what you'll be able to do is, Flyer Talk is this great website. It's one of the oldest web forums out there for travel hacking. And if you can find data points, very recent data points, where people are like, hey, I purchased United Travel Bank with my Amex Aspire card on July 20th, and it was reimbursed on July 22nd. And then you can have some confidence going into it. But again, with so many, little, and that's a little bit more of a trick than I usually like to talk about, but have the money set aside that in case you need to cover it, because Amex, the day that you do it is the day that Amex decides, nope, we're not reimbursing this anymore. Just have the money set aside. Don't be doing this if you don't have an emergency fund. This is very advanced personal finance and travel hacking techniques that we're talking about here. So, I mean, this year I was able to, between all my platinum cards, my Amex Aspire cards, I had $2,800 in my United Travel Bank in 1 year.
Ooh.
So yeah, so that was a pretty good haul.
I can't wait to come visit you.
Yeah, I hope Spencer buys the ticket, right?
That's right.
So I'll share one last one that we, like you said, we normally don't like to go too many into these kind of hot takes of hacks, but the other one that is, as of the time of this recording, is working. And again, look at Flyer Talk to see the most recent data points. But if you have a Delta gift card, you can buy it at Target or PayPal or anything like that. You put a portion of your ticket on the gift card, and then the additional collection, the rest of it bills as additional collection, which has been getting reimbursed as well. And then if you have multiple cards and you have to change your flight for any reason, each time you change your flight, that additional collection would also trigger it. So I personally have used that as I had a gift card, booked part of it, had to change my flight, the flight change, the increase in fare for the new flight reimbursed. And so that ended up happening a couple times, and it just kept getting reimbursed. So that's another one too. But again, that could stop any minute.
I'd be curious to know what airlines military members most frequently select, like on their platinum cards. Is it the airline they fly the most because they're buying? Like, I know a lot of people, my military friends, just kind of go hog wild on the flights with like in-flight purchases, and they like use it for that. Whereas, like, sounds like the three of us try to squeeze it out for travel dollars. Like we'll forego the in-flight booze, and we'll rather get money in our travel banks. But we kind of wonder what other military members tend to do with their $200, if they even use the $200 credit. I don't know.
Yeah, great
I would
question.
say the vast majority of them, especially since Amex makes it so hard to use, I would say the vast majority of them probably don't use the $200 credit. I know, like the Chase $300 credit. I mean, that's easy. Like, I've used that accidentally a dozen times just because I'm like, I just put a flight on my Chase card. And I'm like, oh shoot, there goes my $300 travel credit for the year. All right, Robin, just a couple more questions about Amex Platinum benefits. Saks Fifth Avenue. Now, I thought that this was the most useless credit when I first got the Amex Platinum card. $50 at Saks Fifth Avenue, like everything in there costs $100 minimum, I felt like. But after stacking a few Amex Platinum cards, I was able to get some pretty awesome cashmere sweaters from there. So what's the latest on the Saks Fifth Avenue?
Yeah. And I'm with you, Spencer. When I first got that, I was totally thinking that that's just like a useless benefit. When am I ever going to use that? I've since come to really appreciate it and learn how to maximize that benefit. But I got to say, sometimes it's stressful because like I haven't spent it, and then it's like the end of June, and I'm like, or the end of December, and like the last thing I want to be doing on like New Year's Eve is like trying to place like 6 Saks orders, and hope they ship by. So it is a little stressful, but I got to get better about making my Saks purchases earlier in the half of the year. But there actually is a lot of good stuff you can find. So if you go to Saks, right, for the listeners that don't know about this, the Amex Platinum gives a $50 Saks credit twice a year. So between January and June 30th, and then July 1st and December 31st. And it depends, the tricky part is, it depends not when you place the order, but when Saks decides to charge the card. So I've been burned on this a few times. It could sit pending for like 7 days with Saks. And then when Saks ships it from their warehouse, then it bills your Amex card. So I've placed orders on like June 25th thinking I'm good. They sit pending on my Amex, but then they don't post until like July 3rd. And then it'll count for the second half. So try to do your Saks orders earlier in the half of the year so you don't miss out. But what I do is I go to Saks.com or SaksFifthAvenue.com, go to sale, and then you can shop by price, and you can actually just pull up everything on the site that's under $50. And if you get to, a lot of it is free shipping anyway. Like I'm doing it right now as we're talking, and you can find, like actually the shirt I'm wearing right now. My buddy found it, and he had the card too, and he was like, hey, we can get these Vineyard Vines hooded sweatshirts for like $44 or something.
Nice.
So we each got them, and it was kind of fun because we got like matching shirts and wore them together. But
it's cute.
Yeah, it's really, really nice, right? So we're bonding over that.
Don't give Spencer any ideas. Next thing you know, we're going to be matching on the next recording.
Yeah, we need to have Military Money Manual branded shirts.
Yeah, they'll be branded like anything that is within the Saks. I tease one of my other Coast Guard commander friends. He's like asking for birthday gifts for my daughter. And I was like, what are you browsing the Saks website? Like, because I know you're going to send me a birthday gift it's going to come right from a Saks package, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
how I get around that limitation of the $50 is I just buy gift cards, and at the physical Saks building. Store. Yeah. So we had one in Honolulu, which I think has since shut down, but I'm actually making a trip back to the States, a pilgrimage, if you will, in a few weeks. And one of the places I will be stopping, actually, I think I might go to the real Saks Fifth Avenue in New York City. But yeah, all you have to do is find a customer service person and say, I want to buy a gift card. And in Honolulu, at least, they got so used to military guys coming in. I would just hand her a stack of 10 Amex Platinum cards and say $50 gift cards on each of these, please. And then it would get reimbursed. And one time I had a pretty sharp customer service gal, and she said, do you know that we can combine it all into one gift card? And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's
Next
just
level.
if they know how to, if they know how to do the split tender, the split transaction. There's actually someone in the Atlanta Saks Fifth Avenue that knew how to do that as well. So yeah, that was, and then you just have, a $600, $500 gift card.
But one of my favorite stories there was when we were living in Manhattan with our daughter. My wife wanted to buy one of these travel strollers by Yo-Yo. It's like the super collapsible one that fits up in the overhead, and they're like crazy expensive. And once I found out that Saks sold them, I was like all in on it. I was like, yes, we can go. We can. So I called the Saks in New York, their flagship store, and I was like, do you have any Yo-Yo strollers? And they're like, yeah, we have one in stock. And I was like, come on. And we take our daughter. I have a funny picture of it. We jump on the subway. I was like, we got to get there before it sells. We get there and we buy it. It was like, I don't know, $280 or something like that. Then you have to buy all the accessories and the seat. And I was like, do you mind splitting that between 6 different cards? And she looked at me like, you serious? And she's like, no problem. And I was like, fantastic. $50 on this one, 51 on this one, 52 on this one. And we walk out the door for like $10 or something like that with this awesome stroller that we still use to this day. So the split tender in person definitely still works if you find the right rep. And I don't know, maybe your mileage may vary on the gift cards. If Amex, I don't want to be closed down from Amex. So Amex gets level 3 reporting data from, they know what you buy at Saks. So if they can see if you're buying a gift card versus buying a stroller. So if you get that, you track the attention of what they call the RAT team, right? The rewards abuse team at Amex, then that's like a real department at Amex. And if you get caught by the RAT team, then they can shut you all down. So like any of this stuff, you got to be prepared for that.
Yeah, especially if you have a bunch of points in your account.
Yeah. But for the military members right out there that have that $50 credit twice a year, just go to the Saks site, sort by sale under $50, pick out any number of things that are interesting. You can get some undershirts, you can get underwear, you can get socks, sale clothing, and you can get free shipping. If you sign up for an email account, you can get 10% off your order. So pretty easy to use. I know we picked up a lot of stuff for our daughters, and my wife got some mascara that she likes. It's like $25, so we got 2 of those. And I found that actually to be a pretty helpful benefit. It went from like worthless to now actually pretty helpful. You can get kitchen knives and all this like nice high quality stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely get some value out of the Saks credit. Okay, Rob, just a couple more travel hacking questions, and then we'll move on to a couple other topics. But what's your most used card, and what do you carry daily?
So currently, it's my Paceline card, because that's 3% back everywhere, and then 5% back on groceries if I hit my fitness goals. That's currently the case. Other than that, it would be my American Express Blue Business Plus. So I love that one. 50,000 point sign up bonus, but 2x back on everything. So cashing that out via the Schwab site, it's 2.2 back on everything. So I love that on non-bonus categories. And then I don't mind carrying a couple cards. So I usually have like 4 cards in my wallet. So it'll be whatever card I'm working on minimum spend for. I always try to be working on minimum spend at any given time. And then if I'm not working on minimum spend, if I'm between sign-up bonuses, then I'll either do Paceline, American Express Blue Business Plus, or the Chase Freedom Unlimited, Chase Reserve, or City Prestige. So it's like, I know it should be a shorter answer, but it's kind of more detailed than that.
No, that's yeah. I mean, that just shows the level of sophistication that you've applied to the game. Something I used to dabble with a little bit more in college when I had more access to physical banks and more time was bank bonuses. And I see them sometimes on Doctor of Credit. That's doctorofcredit.com if you're not familiar, which is a great resource for military travel hackers. But what's the current status of bank bonuses, and can you explain what they are and how to get them?
Yeah, sure. So this is something that I've gotten more into once I kind of exhausted the credit card game, or things started tightening down. I had always written off bank bonuses as just being like, not worth the time and effort. And then Dr. Credit has a post that says something like, "What are bank bonuses and why you should give them a try?" And I really trust his site and his advice. And I read the post and I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And basically, a bank bonus, it's like a CD, kind of, if you think about it, a certificate of deposit. You give the bank a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time, and they give you a bonus for tying up that money for that amount of time. So, like, an easy one that just kind of launched again. Yes, these come and go, but Chase just came out with a $600 bonus if you open up a Chase checking and savings account. And you get a $300 bonus for the checking, $200 for savings, and then an extra $100 if you do both of those bonuses. And there are Chase banks pretty much in every city across the country. They're really easy to go into. Their bonuses pay very reliably. It's only if you're a new Chase customer. Chase even gives really good benefits for military members. So they waive the monthly fees on your checking account and that kind of stuff. So you can get the good checking account for free as a military member. So you go in and you do this bonus. So you tie up, like, the savings account bonus requires $15,000 deposited for 90 days, and then it pays out a $200 bonus. But if you think about that return on investment, it's actually far better than your Ally or Discover or other high yield savings account if you annualize the interest. So I'll just move my emergency fund over from Ally or Discover or Marcus over to Chase for 90 days, get the bonus, and then move on. So they're pretty attractive. Give them a try. There's some easy starter ones out there, and you'll find that it's nice to collect between $400 and $600, every 3 or 4 months. You can make a couple $1,000s a year. My wife and I make a couple $1,000s a year each on bank bonuses.
Nice. Rob, one question we get sometimes is advice on how to meet the minimum spend when you open up these cards. You just mentioned you like to always be working on one. So with your CFP background, and what suggestions do you have for organic or kind of natural monthly spending, if maybe they're a service member that doesn't quite meet that normally, or they're a younger service member? As for example, the Amex Delta Reserve right now is $5,000 minimum spend in 3 months, so almost $1,700 a month required in spending. So any ideas on that?
Yeah, and yeah, it's a common question, and it's a good thing to think about. And I think we would all agree the number one thing is you don't want it to increase your actual spend, or you don't want it to you don't want to spend money. I always tell people, like, don't pick up the tab at the bar just because you have a minimum spend to hit, right? Or like, don't go out and buy, I need to spend $2,000 on my Amex card, so I better go buy this sofa that I wasn't otherwise going to buy. But if you frame it like, hey, I'm going to go buy, my wife and I have talked about buying a new sofa. It's about $2,000. We're going to go out and buy it. We've thought about it for several months. This is a decision we've budgeted for. Don't just put that on a debit card, right? Like, that's almost a whole minimum spend right there. So, like, get a card, put the sofa on it. As long as it's not increasing your otherwise spend, I'm all for that. So some tips there to kind of help would be, if you can, I know you talked about this in the last show, if you can put TD, if you're allowed, and if your branch of service allows you to put TDY or TAD expenses on your personal cards, it's kind of like a risk preference thing. But like, and I know in the Coast Guard, we have to book our flights on our government travel cards. We were like required to. We get in trouble with our commands if we don't. But if they allow you to put like other hotels or incidentals on there, and you have the money to pay it off, even if the travel claim doesn't come through, then might as well do that and collect to help hit the minimum spend. Another one that I like to use is paying your estimated quarterly tax. So you can go on, there are 3 sites that allow you to make IRS payments, and you can pay your federal taxes via credit card and incur like a 1.9% fee, but that's well worth it to get the sign up bonus. So I do that. And I also pay my property tax on my credit card. So like, I live in the Bay Area, we have really high property tax, and I'll gladly put on an $8,000 charge for property tax, pay, $200 in fees if I'm getting a $1,200 value sign up bonus. So people are always like, why would you put your property tax on your credit card? It's a 2% fee. And I'm like, well, exactly, because I'll get a new card, and that's like a $10,000 min spend right there.
Nice. So you just mentioned budget. I have to ask a follow-up there. So last episode that we recorded that you haven't heard yet, it hasn't been released yet, we talked about budgeting, and Spencer and I have a little bit different techniques of budgeting. I'm still a very detailed budgeter, even though I don't really need to be. Spencer's more of a anti-budgeter, reverse budgeter, set a high savings rate, and then don't worry about it. So would you mind sharing what kind of budget you still maintain, if any, or do you just set a savings rate and not worry about it?
Sure. And one thing I want to ask you, Spencer, as well, it's like in your book, I was reading it, and I saw that you said you have many checking accounts, and one of them, it's like an account that anytime you make a purchase on your credit card, then you transfer money out of that account. And when I read that, I was like, that's got to be so time consuming. Like you swipe your card, and then you have to log on to your bank and make like a $42 transfer from one account to the next. Like, do you?
Yeah, that's what I don't do that anymore. Okay. But that was something that when we had first got married, I was a young lieutenant, wasn't making a lot of money, was making a lot of student loan payments. When I knew that I was, basically losing money using a debit card. And I mean, there's lots of other reasons to not use a debit card. I mean, you're putting your own money at risk. They could, if somebody got a hold of your debit card, they can just wipe out your checking account, and then it's up to USAA or Navy Federal, whoever your bank is, by their good graces to make you whole again and then investigate the fraud. Whereas with a credit card, I have had my credit card stolen so many times, and 9 times out of 10, there's like 4 fraudulent transactions. And I'll log in and check my credit card activity once a week or whatever, and I'll see the fraudulent transactions. And if the credit card company hasn't already shut it down, then I'll phone them up, report the fraud, and it just disappears. Like you don't even. It's never a problem when you have your credit card information stolen. Unlike if you have your debit card information stolen. Yeah. But we were transitioning, so we had been very strict about using our debit card for all purchases because we were living paycheck to paycheck and we needed to break that cycle. And so when we transitioned to using, I think at the time it was like a Chase Freedom card, just because I was starting slow and I just wanted the cash. That was one thing I did, was that if I went into Walmart and we spent $200 on groceries, log into USA, boom, move $200 from my, from the account where the money came in to the bills account. And then I knew that when I got the credit card bill at the end of the month, the cash was going to be there. There's no question about it. So that was one technique that we used very early on. And that's not something I do anymore. But I still think it's for the right person who's trying to get a handle back on their finances, it's almost like the cash envelope system digitized,
Yeah. That's interesting because people always ask me when I run these corporate workshops, like I ran one today, people ask me like, what tips and tricks do you have for budgeting? So I'm always curious on like what systems work for people at various stages of their budgeting comfort level. So that's like a good one to kind of tuck away, and that I can see how that would be helpful. It's like, oh, I know that money is accounted for. I can pay for my credit card. It's like using a debit card, but you get the perks and benefits of a credit card. So that makes sense. So to answer, Jamie, your original question there about what our family does for how detailed we get on budgeting, it sounds like we kind of align, which I don't know if this comes as a surprise or not from a financial planner, but we kind of align more with Spencer. So we set like our high savings goals, make sure we're hitting them. We pay ourselves first. So money goes immediately into, my wife's TSP, my solo 401k, our Roth IRAs we fund generally at the beginning of the year. And then we have our discretionary spending. We do like the auto routing to different accounts. So we have an account just set for our house that we have all of our utilities pay from. All of our mortgage gets deducted from there. We do our own escrow for our property taxes into that account. So much like Spencer just described, we know without even lifting a finger, we know that we're going to have money for our housing expense, every month. Do the same thing for childcare and daycare. And then our discretionary spending after that, like we don't really track that super closely. Like we sit down and look at that every couple of months in like Mint and Excel, but we don't really care if like 1 month we spend an extra 100 in dining out and the next month we spend 100 less in travel. As long as like we give ourselves leeway on our discretionary spending, as long as we're hitting our overall savings goals, and our saving, we are mindful of our saving rate, and we like check that several times throughout the year. But we don't really track like, every dollar kind of thing in discretionary spending. It's just doesn't work for our family. But I know people that really do benefit from that.
So where do you go, Rob, for updates on credit card travel hacking news? Or you mentioned Doctor of Credit. Do you have any kind of go-to newsletters or websites that you really enjoy following?
Yeah, I check Doctor of Credit usually a couple times a day. It's kind of like my little break. So I like that one. I sign up for his newsletter. So I think the thing that I really like about him is he doesn't do a lot of credit card, or he doesn't do any credit card affiliate links. So that if he's posting an offer, it's totally authentic and the best for the reader. I also like Ask Sebi. That's Sebastian. He's in the Bay Area. He has a great YouTube channel. Gets really into redemptions, and I find him entertaining. He also has a website, so that's Ask Sebi. And what else? Prince of Travel is another decent YouTube channel that I like. I think he's Canadian, so it's not everything applies, but he does a good job of talking about different redemption options. I'm trying to improve my redemption game. I'm looking for redemption, I guess you should say. So
takes a lot of work.
Yeah, like I don't do a good job with redemption. So those would be my go-to. I occasionally read the Points Guy, but it's kind of like, I don't know. I always feel bad. I don't really like the Points Guy, and I don't think he does. It's just like kind of feel. I think most people in the game here kind of feel the same way. But occasionally he will have some content that is helpful to read. So those are kind of my go-tos. I don't think there's really much beyond that I check or consume on a regular basis.
I feel like I have to go to confession anytime I read a TPG article. Although the Points Guy, like you said, every once in a while there's something that's like, oh man, they did a really nice job breaking that down. But I try to avoid it as well.
They hire some really good writers and they hire some really smart travel people. So I do, every once in a while, like if I'm Googling something, and I mean, obviously my website hopefully pops up first. But if that doesn't happen, then it's I'm usually going to click on like upgraded points rather than a Points Guy article. But sometimes he's got the exact article, solving the exact problem I'm trying to figure out. So yeah, you gotta give credit where credit's due.
And I feel like I used to be on churning on Reddit a fair amount, but like that, I don't know, in the last 2 years or so, I feel like that's just gone downhill. And every time I try to post something on there, it gets like deleted by the mods. And I'm like, that was a legit question. And people are on you. They're like, that should have been in the daily moderation, weekly question. And I was like, can I just ask a question without being lambasted about where it goes?
Those Reddit moderators are the worst, right, Spencer?
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
So I've found less value in Reddit, but occasionally you can read something, an old data point on Reddit that's helpful. But especially on Dr. Credit, the comment section, people are for the most part helpful, and you can ask a question and it'll get answered, in there.
Yeah. I think for like so many websites, as long as you've like shown that you've done a little bit of research coming into it, then it's usually pretty friendly to ask a question. But I found that too, that I think I started the military finance subreddit. I can't prove it because my email doesn't go back that far enough, but I'm still a moderator of it. And sometimes it will seem like every day we get a question about like, how should I invest my TSP? And it's like, oh man, come on, like go read just like go read anything and go read the frequently asked questions. Like we covered this on the Reddit site, but also like there's so many good articles out there. Just do like a little bit of research, or like go to the library and check out a book, a little book of common sense investing, or shoot, I mean, I wrote a book about it. So yeah, there's definitely like, it's definitely, if you can come to a site and you've at least shown that like you've done some research before you ask your question, I think most people are pretty friendly.
Speaking of the TSP, Rob, what do you tell people about the TSP despite the new app and what we thought would be some positive changes? Are you a life cycle kind of guy, or do you have a preferred CS&I split or anything like that you kind of use as a default?
Yeah, I love the TSP. I say the TSP is a military member's biggest friend. Doug Norman is a good friend of mine, and I know he's shown many examples of, I know he was on your show, he's shown many examples of how you become a millionaire, with your TSP. He's living proof of that. I say it's the best thing. I'm a life cycle guy. I value the simplicity. When they refreshed the life cycle funds and they added the ones beyond 2050, things got better because the life cycle funds got more aggressive, which I was interested in, and they came in 5-year increments. So now I have everything in the 2065 fund for my wife and I. It's like, I think it's like 90 or 95% equities, which is great. And I might reevaluate that as we get closer and as that allocation would start to shift. But I really do appreciate the simplicity of it. I think the knock against the life cycle funds maybe was that they were too conservative, but I think that has changed since they refreshed the funds. So I really like the simplicity of it, because even though we tell people to go in and, if you tell an O1 or an E3, a CS&I mix, and you say, oh, this is good for you when you're, 20 years old or 22 years old, and you tell them, but you got to go in and rebalance this as you get older, or you got to go in and, slightly get more conservative when you're 50 years old. Like, more likely than not, they're not going to do that. And just because, we forget, or, time comes in. So like, that's the value of the life cycle fund, is it's going to lock you in and commit you to that adjusting over time. So I'm a fan of that. I wrote a whole article on, military members generally benefit from the Roth TSP more so than the traditional TSP, just because we already get so many good tax breaks now with the AH not being taxed. Now is a great time to invest in the Roth flavor of the TSP, because when you get out, your tax rate's going to jump. Between state tax and federal tax, they'll both probably go up. So I love the TSP, despite the new app and the new website, like we said, not being so great. I left I left active duty. I could have moved all my money out of the TSP. I didn't. It's all still sitting there. It's in like an L2065 fund. And I really don't check it. Like, I check it maybe 3 times a year, and that's it. I feel like I'm resetting my password every time I try to log in. But I tell people, like, you don't want to check it that often. You don't have to. I elect to get the paper statements because I think this is a good reason why. But like, it's nice to have a paper trail at some point. And now we can't even access old statements on the new website, right? Like, you can't even pull up your old statements, which is, I think is just a shame. But there is some value in getting paper statements every now and then.
So I have a follow-up for you, Rob. So let's say, I know we're not giving financial advice here, but let's say I've been thinking about for a while, I really should switch from my CS&I blend to a life cycle fund and make my portfolio a little more aggressive there. And I also know that we don't want to try too much to time the market or anything. Right now, when we're recording this, overall, the market is still way down from the early 2022 drop. Is it unwise to rebalance either in or out of a life cycle fund when the market's at an extreme drop like it is right now? Or would you kind of say, just make the decision and go with it, and don't worry so much about either a big loss or big gain, even in a retirement account, and not necessarily in a brokerage account where there might be tax implications of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Unfortunately, it's not so much of an easy answer. I'd like to say that just go ahead and make the change, but it depends on what you're shifting from, Jamie, right? So if you're at, say, like if you gave the example of CS&I and then you're going to life cycle, CS&I is 100% equities. There's no F fund, there's no G fund. So you're at 100% equity portfolio. So you'd be going from something that's more aggressive to something that's probably slightly less aggressive, depending on which life cycle fund you pick. And if you follow through that example, while the market's down, it's probably not the best time to make that change, but it's a better time than never making it. So if you're going from something that's like a 50-50, if for some reason your account was 50% G fund and 50% C fund, then conversely, kind of would be a good time to shift to a life cycle fund because the G fund hasn't gone down and you're buying equities on the cheap, right? So like if you're going in that direction, then yes, jump at the opportunity to make the change. So I look at market downturns not as like a depressing time, but as a time to maybe like tweak my allocations, or do I have idle cash that maybe I hadn't been prudent about investing? Do I want to make my Roth IRA contributions early? Do I want to increase my TSP contributions, for the time being? As long as for the new members, you don't want to max your TSP early, of course, right? But like for the legacy members, you can max it out early in the year if you want, because you're not getting the matching dollars. But that's how I try to think of like, I don't believe in market timing, but that's generally how I think about opportunities. Is it a good time to make a change? If I've been meaning to make that change anyway.
One of the topics that always comes up, Rob, when we're talking to fellow military service members is real estate. And we've had Rich Carey on the show, who's an example of a military real estate mogul, regular Donald Trump with his monopoly board of properties there. And, a lot of people hear those stories and they're like, man, like, if I had a chief and he, purchased a rental property every time he PCS'd, and now he's got this like $1 million portfolio and he's just creaming it, right? He's got more money coming in from his rental properties than he does from his pension. And what do you have to say about that? Are you like super excited about real estate, or do you advise like a little bit of caution?
I would say it's not for everyone, Spencer. If I would ask the person, does that like listen to Rich's episode, and does that sound, I did listen to that episode, and like, does that sound interesting to you? So like managing, I think he has like 23 doors, he called it, right? Like, does that sound appealing to you, or does that sound like a headache to you, right? So like, do you want to be a property manager for 23 tenants and deal with listing properties, fixing plumbing, coordinating maintenance people, and that kind of stuff? Some people really like that. That's great. That's what they envision their retirement being, quote unquote, passive income. I say it's not really passive because you're doing all this work to maintain it, right? It's not like a free lunch, because that's a lot of work maintaining 23 rentals.
It's very active passive.
It's very active, but real estate people like to call that passive income. I would argue otherwise. But if that sounds appealing to you, then by all means, like that could be your retirement. Collect that. Have a bigger emergency fund, because if half your tenants move out and stiffy on the rent, you're going to need to be on the hook for those mortgages, right? So there are certain things financial planning wise that we could do to better position military members who are going to follow the real estate kind of path. But it's not the only path to wealth by any means. And if that doesn't sound appealing to you, like that's not how I want to spend my retirement. I don't want to have, 20 real estate properties that I manage. I'd rather have a robust investment portfolio that I can withdraw 4% from every year and not have to think about it. And I don't have to do any maintenance on that. Like, to me, that's passive investing or passive income. So I do own rental properties. I bought at my first duty station, and I held that for 20 years. It's in New Hampshire. It's a single family home in New Hampshire. I've been through a stretch of good tenants. I've been through a stretch, unfortunately, of really bad tenants that didn't pay their rent for 5 months and wouldn't move out of the property. So just like we talked about those lessons learned in investing, like that was a firsthand slap in my face about, what do I do as like a 28-year-old who has a property that I'm on the hook for the mortgage and the property tax, and the tenants won't move out. Like literally they wouldn't leave. And I was like, well, you got to go find a place you can afford. And they were like, well, we can't move out. And I was like, well, you're not paying your rent. You can't stay here. And, going through that whole thing, it was really unfortunate. But that's the story that doesn't get shared that often with like people who are gung-ho on real estate. And I think it's an important side of the story, because just like when you invest in the stock market, things go up, but often and you expect things to go down. Just like that's important to talk about in real estate investing. You're going to have good tenants and you're going to have really easy income. And then you're going to have really difficult income and you're going to have to deal with bad tenants that trash your place and vacancies. Like I had a military friend who couldn't rent his place in Connecticut for like 2 years. It sat vacant.
Whoa.
And like, people don't like to talk about that story because it's kind of embarrassing and it's a terrible financial mistake, but that's the risk you run. So, I think it's, if you really like real estate, then pursue that path, but I often see people, especially military members, get pressured into real estate and they kind of get like told or brainwashed that you have to have real estate to build wealth. And a lot of people are selling courses and all this stuff. And it's like, it doesn't have to be like that. You can just invest in the TSP and your Roth IRA and low cost index funds and be just as happy. And, and be maintenance free kind of thing. So that's kind of my take on real estate. I personally really like real estate. We go to open houses all the time. But I know I only own one rental property at this time, and we'll probably own 3 after this next duty station because we're going to rent out our current house as 2 rental properties when we leave. So I'll have a different kind of take or stories to tell in a couple of years after that.
Having a tenant that doesn't pay rent and won't move out just sounds like an absolute nightmare to me. And yeah, I'm so glad that the one time that we bought property, condo in Tacoma, Washington, we sold it after 3 years and did not become long distance landlords. Because even best case scenario, right? Like what if we had the perfect tenants for 10 years and nothing ever broke? I think it'd be hard to sleep at night.
Rob, as a military spouse yourself and a period of time where maybe you guys had mill to mill or dual income there, do you have any other tips for dual income families or mill to mill families that maybe, 203s or 2E7s that are making pretty good money?
Yeah. If you feel like, you're in that situation, you're married mill to mill or member to member, and you have especially pre-kids, that is the 2 BAHs, 2, nice incomes there.
Yeah.
I would say use those years as like your golden years for saving, because it's just a great time to max out your TSP, max out your Roth IRAs. My wife and I lived on we lived in Manhattan and we lived, she was going to grad school with the Coast Guard. We lived just on her income. And then we saved my income, my entire income. So we had our savings rate. And this was we were able to do it in Manhattan with a kid, probably arguably the highest cost of living city, right, in the US.
Yeah.
We were able to save our savings rate was up to like 45%. And it was really easy budgeting wise because we could just take my entire paycheck and it just went right to savings. So like simplicity was great. And then we could just live off of her paycheck there. So I would say to those mill to mill members, if you feel like you have that excess funds, or you feel like you're in a position in your life where you could jack up your savings rate, like it's a great time to do it. You don't have a lot of other expenses. You're getting dual BAHs. Another trick, mill to mill, a lot of mill to mill people don't know this. If you haven't used your post 9/11 GI Bills, look at transferring them to one another even before you have kids, because then that starts your 4-year payback clock. You have to be in the service for 4 years after transferring your GI Bills to one another. But you might think, like, I tell this to mill members, I'm like, why would I transfer my GI Bill to my wife, and why would my wife transfer it to me? It's just for that reason. Then your 4-year clock is already done. And when you have kids, that doesn't reset the 4-year clock. So a little personal finance hack around the post 9/11 GI Bill there too.
That's good.
Yeah.
Rob, what about those service members who are going to separate before 20 years? Any hacks or tips for them?
Yeah. I would say, and I separated from active duty after 10 years. A lot of my friends that are separating before, well, not so many anymore because most of my year groups are, up at the 16, 17 year mark. But when I hear people separating before 20, I say, have you considered it a reserve career? A career in one of the reserve or National Guard branches, because that is a fantastic way to keep your benefits. And, you can still get TRICARE. You can still earn credit towards your pension. So a lot of my friends that separated just weren't aware of what it's like to be a reservist. and what the requirements are and what the perks and benefits of it are. Fortunately, it was explained to me, and I was like, yeah, I would do that. It's kind of a way to do a soft retirement from the military or keep a foot in the door. You can still get great TRICARE, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur. You can get really good TRICARE benefits, and that if your entrepreneurship gig doesn't work out like you thought, you can take some long-term active duty orders or 6-month orders. I constantly have offers go on like 3-month orders, 6-month orders, 1-year orders. I usually decline them because I'd rather work on my own business, but it's great. It's like such a nice safety net knowing that if my business doesn't work out, I could roll into like a 3-month EAD or ADOS, whatever the acronym in your service applies to you. I could roll into those orders. So, if you're separating before 20 and you're not like totally disgusted with the military, then consider a career in the reserves, because another perk is you can transfer your 9/11 GI Bill to your kids. If you didn't have kids when you were on active duty and you're going to have kids after you separate, by being in the reserves, you can transfer your GI Bill down to them and then make that transfer valid as a reservist. So lots of benefits of being in the reserves. Of course, you have to be okay with being deployed. They could always call you up. So there's always, I don't want to misguide anyone on that part. There's I don't know if you call those risks, or there's what could happen if you're in the reserves. You have to be okay being called up, but just think about it, because not everyone does, and it's kind of sad to see someone separate when they didn't know about the reserve opportunities.
Yeah, those can definitely be overlooked by people as they're kind of in the rush and the hustle and bustle of separating before 20 years. Rob, thanks so much for hanging out with us for the last hour and a half or so. Before we start wrapping up here, are there any books that you'd like to recommend? And that can be, anything. It could be military, it could be leadership, it could be financial independence, it could be money related, investing related, anything that you'd recommend our listeners to go check out and read.
Yeah, I like, you talked about the psychology of money on your last or one of your previous shows. I really like that one. Another one that I got a lot of value from was by Josh Brown and Brian Portnoy, called How I Invest My Money. That was really, I just thought really cool. Each chapter was a different story from a different personal finance kind of personality, and talking about how they do their budgeting and how they do their investing. I just liked that. It was like a very refreshing style to read. And I don't know, I generally tend to read like personal finance and nonfiction books, but I did read a good one. One of my reserve colleagues challenged me the other day, and he's like, "Rob, what's the last fiction book you read?" And I was like so embarrassed that I couldn't even like think of like what was the last fiction book I read. And so then I went home to one of my friends, a Navy veteran who's a neighbor of mine, and he reads all the time. So he gave me a novel, which I really liked, and it was called The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert. So I just finished that one. We were on a trip to Norway, and I finished that on our trip to Norway, and I couldn't put it down. So you got one nonfiction and one fiction recommendation out of me.
Okay, Rob, what are you working on right now that you want people to know about? You mentioned, kind of helping businesses in their benefits package and talking to their employees about personal finance. What are kind of your big projects right now?
Yeah, I'd love to. I kind of feel like I got my studio set up at home now with like a professional camera and a professional microphone. So my next project is I'd like to start doing some live streams on YouTube, and just kind of in the personal finance investing space, and just help people. So I do these regularly with companies, but I've never done it in kind of like the public sphere to YouTube. And I've seen some live stream folks that I really, really like, and I think do a great job of engaging the audience. And it's just something I've always wanted to try. So I'm going to publicly state that as a goal, and that'll put me on the accountability hook of, 6 months from now, I want to have published like 2 or 3 live streams. So that'll be good, because then I'll promise it to the listeners, and now I'll have to make good on my goal here. So I'd say that's kind of like my next project. And then we also have kiddo number 3 coming this October. So I better get that done before October, because after that, my free time is gonna be quite limited.
Yeah, I can't wait to see those the videos and live stream. Please keep us updated on those.
Yeah, and congrats on kid number 3 on the way.
Yeah,
Rob, where can listeners go to find you? What's the best way that they can track you down on the World Wide Web?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. Fireside Finance is my company name. My website's Fireside Finances, and I'm also on Twitter as Robert Shaye. And LinkedIn, I'm fairly active on LinkedIn as well. So any of those are my kind of go-to social media channels. And and hopefully I'll be more active on YouTube once I get those live streams up and running and the recordings published. But that's to be determined yet.
Thanks again to Rob Shaye for joining us today on the Military Money Manual podcast. That's Shaye, Shaye. Fireside Finances is his company. Lots of tactical and actionable advice that Rob brought us today. 3 key takeaways that I brought from this episode. Rob talked about passive index fund investing. Number 2, military travel hacking. And number 3, when a certified financial planner might be right for you. If you want to hear some other guest interviews, you can check out episode number 31, where we had Doug Nordman on the podcast talking about 20 years of post-financial independent life. Episode number 30, Rich Carey, where we discussed building a real estate empire while on active duty. Or episode number 33, when we had our friend and fellow pilot Luke, and we talked about maximizing military space aid travel benefits. If you have any questions or feedback, you can message us, as always, on Instagram at Military Money Manual, or email info@militarymoneymanual.com, or Twitter at @milmoneymanual. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Military Money Manual podcast.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Military Money Manual podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Hey guys and gals, Spencer here again. Before I let you go, I want to let you know about 2 things. First, my 100% free course. It's called the Ultimate Military Credit Cards course, and you can sign up today at militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3. I've been running this course for over 4 years now, and we just celebrated our 7,000th graduate. In this course, I walk you through an absolute beginner's guide to travel hacking and opening your first fee-waived credit cards in the military. Again, you can sign up today at militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3. It's 100% free, no spam, and you can unsubscribe at any time. Second, my book, The Military Money Manual, A Practical Guide to Financial Freedom, is available on my website and Amazon today. Head over to shop.militarymoneymanual.com, or if you want the Amazon version, search Military Money Manual. This is the book I wish someone had handed me on my first day in the military. In this book, I cover the exact money tactics and investment strategies I used on my path to achieve financial independence while I served in the U.S. Air Force. The book is the best personal finance book specifically for you, whether you're an active duty, guard, reserve, a military spouse, enlisted, or officer. Any ROTC or Academy cadet can benefit from the tactical and strategic advice I lay out in the book. But don't just take my word for it. Here's 2 reviews of the book. Ryan on Goodreads.com wrote, "The most comprehensive investing personal finance book specifically written for military members I've read so far. This book should be handed to every new LT at commissioning." Matt on Amazon said, "This book is incredibly straightforward, easy to understand, practical, and useful. This book should be on the Commandant's reading list." Thanks, Matt. If you're interested in the book, head over to my website, shop.militarymoneymanual.com, and podcast listeners can use promo code PODCAST to get a special discount on the ebook, audiobook, and hardcover book. You can find the audiobook on Audible, the ebook on Amazon Kindle, and the hardcover book on Amazon. Or again, head over to my website and use promo code PODCAST for a special discount. Thanks for listening.